a first, a second and a third, but sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, especially if you're embarking on quite a large renovation. So today I'm answering your question. So I recently received a question from Jess over on TikTok who wanted to know whether or not I think they would be able to DIY their home renovation. And I feel like there is so much to unpack here. For those of you who are new here, my name is Claire, my husband. I have designed and renovated homes across 3 continents, and we're currently renovating our own home. We're doing as much of it ourselves. We get asked a lot, I don't know if I'd be able to do it. Now, we obviously started somewhere, and there's always a first, a second and a third, but sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, especially if you're embarking on quite a large renovation. There's some things I thought I would go through today just to help prepare you so that you can really make a more informed decision on whether or not it would be right for you and whether or not you feel like you're setting yourself up for success. So the first thing I would say is renovating is really, really stressful. So if you are planning to live in a renovation, that stress level has just been heightened, especially if it's your own home, because there's a lot of emotional elements that go into designing your own home. We've renovated for years. We didn't live in those houses. So although there were certain stress factors, we weren't renovating for ourselves. So it did take some of those sort of emotional elements out of it. It was more like a business. But when we're renovating our own home, we're living in it. We have 3 kids, 3 dogs, and there are times when renovation fatigue just sets in. The mess gets overwhelming, the dirt, the grime. There's a level of, I would say, comfort and a level of acceptance that you have to have when embarking on a renovation, because that initial energy spike that you have at the beginning will wane at some point. So there's a little bit of a mindset preparation that you need to kind of do just to get yourself ready, especially if you're living in a renovation. Secondly, if you are planning to renovate with somebody else, then there is naturally going to be some conflict, because ultimately you kind of come at decisions from a different angle. You're going to have a different point of view. Design is very personal. Everyone is going to have their own take on how things should be finished, or each of you will have your own comfort level when it comes to budget spend and splurges versus savings. So it is really important. It's something my husband and I have done. Our first renovation well over 10 years ago is that we very quickly realized that if we wanted to survive these renovations, we really needed to have a role. In the same way that you don't walk into a job and everyone has the same level of responsibility and everyone is responsible for making the same decision, you each have defined roles and you each have a level of responsibility for the decisions that you have to make. So in our home, I make the design. I'm sort of responsible for the design decisions. I work through all the design plans. I come up with the color schemes. I come up with the structure. Now, it is still a partnership. We go through that. We discuss, we collaborate, but ultimately we decide I'm responsible for coming up with those design plans, and unless he really has a particular opinion on something, ultimately I make those decisions. But we do have a veto. Each of us has the opportunity to veto a decision, and what that means is if it's something that I've come up with that he just hates and can't live with, he's like, I have the right, I'm vetoing this decision and I want to make a change. And in that case, we go back to the drawing board, because ultimately you're both gonna live in the house. You have to love it, you have to enjoy it. But if you argue over every single decision that you have to make, you're gonna get nowhere, and you're gonna end up, it's gonna really end up impacting your relationship. I do think this is something that a lot of people don't realize. Then he's responsible from the construction element. So I can come up with whatever design I want, but ultimately he will tell me whether or not it's feasible, whether it can be done. And if there is a workaround, there are times when I will give him the vision and he's like, well, we can't do it this way, but let me think about it. I'll come up with a different way to deliver that design. And so he comes up with that, and that's his call ultimately. So having your own role is really important. Now, if there's a particular room in the house that's really important to one of us, for example, if it's a bathroom color scheme, those sorts of things, and it's a really important room, Derek was to say, well, I really want this room to be blue, then I would absolutely take that on board, because once again, it's a partnership. So it's all about compromise. It's all about an open communication, but it's really important to make sure that each of you know your role and each of you have a level of responsibility when it comes to decision making. Once you've kind of figured all that out, then there's a lot of planning. So before you even pick up a hammer, before you start to work through your design plans and your mood boards, you really need to do some initial planning. So the most important thing to any home renovation is the floor plan, because these are things that you can't change in the long run. And to be honest, the lion's share of your budget will end up going into construction elements. So if you're walking into a house and you're just doing a cosmetic update, this is probably not that important to you. But if you are planning to open up walls and you want to create a floor plan that really works for you and your family, and you want a floor plan that's going to work for you long term, then you really want to do some planning on the onset. Now, I'm going to talk you through my framework. You can get all of this in my Reno Roadmap, where it's a really practical guide. I walk you through with lots of questions and rooms to help you work through this yourself. But I'm going to take you through the framework today. So first thing is big sky thinking. Don't even think about budget at this point. Have a think about what you really, really want your house to feel like, what you want it to look like, and write that list down. And don't restrict yourself in this process, because ultimately you might find by doing this, you will identify what it is, something that maybe you didn't realize was important to you. But as you start to work through your priority list, which is the second phase, you'll realize, actually, I didn't even think that was an option, but now we've talked about it, I think it's really important to open up that wall to create a future open plan living, which is something really important to me. I didn't think about it as a priority because of our budget, but let's put it on the priority list. So by a big sky thinking, it enables you to really step outside of the box of just looking at your house as four walls. So that's a really important step. Secondly, then you need to really start to prioritize that list and figure out what's important to you. Start at the most important to the least important. Now, when we're talking about this, when we're talking about floor plan and renovating, usually it means that you're opening up walls, maybe you're extending, maybe you're raising like we did. That all needs to be prioritized. The lion's share of your budget is going to go into the construction work of the house if you are doing any major works like that, or replacing roofs. And more than likely, you're going to have to bring somebody in to do that. So we DIY as much of it as ourselves. However, we do bring in licensed professionals. So anything to do with electrical, plumbing, or structural. We do have structural plans. So we worked with a structural engineer, but we have done the work ourselves off those plans, but we didn't raise the house. That's out of our wheelhouse. So you really have to figure out what's required to be licensed and what is in your comfort level and needs to be brought in versus what you can do yourself. Then we need to start talking about budget. So having a whole number budget is not good enough when it comes to renovating, because you might say, well, I've got $50,000 to put into my house. That is going to go like that, especially in this market. So what you really want to be doing is breaking out that budget per room. Now we have a done for you budget. I'll link it below that you can download. It actually includes all the fixtures and fittings. You can just pop in your budget plus, and then also you can update it when you actually start to buy those fixtures and fittings. There's also a timing plan in that as well. So you can start to punch in the numbers of when all the trades are going to be there, so that you know when you need to buy and have those things on site, because you might not realize, but you often have to have the taps on site when they're roughing in the first stage plumbing. There's a lot of moving parts to a renovation, and there's a lot that you might not be aware of that you need to be aware of. So having a budget is important, but breaking it down is going to be so much more important than having a whole number. And then you also need to do some planning around how you're going to finance your renovation. Are you going to get a loan? Are you going to pay cash? Are you going to get money out of equity of the house? And you need to put all of that into place at the onset, so you know what your actual spend can be. Because this stage now, when you have an idea of what you want to do your house, I would be starting to get quotes, and I would be starting to talk to people about what they're doing with their house. Now, if you are doing floor plan changes, you will need, if you are getting planning permission, to work with a draftsman or an architect. So we worked with a draftsman, but we did all of that pre-work ahead of time when it came to our floor plan. That's in the renovation roadmap. That's exactly what I did. That's my process of design to work out the floor plan that would work for us. Once I had that floor plan and Derek and I were both happy with it, we basically scamped it up and we told our draftsman exactly what we wanted and got them to draw that up. We asked them to flag if they thought there were any issues with regards to our plans, and then we went ahead and went through planning with that. So you can do a lot of that yourself, and I would definitely say do not outsource completely the design of your home. So you can have a designer or an architect come in, talk you through it, but then you need to think about it, because ultimately this is your house. You need to figure out how it works for you and your family and how you want it to function. I can hands down tell you that is the most critical step of this entire renovation, because you can go ahead and have the most beautiful house, but if it doesn't work for you and if it doesn't flow for you and your family and how you need it, the whole thing was a waste of money, and it's going to cause you so much frustration in the long run. Once we have our floor plan, once we have our budget, once we have a rough idea of sort of timing, and you can start to think about, you know, who and what what you're prepared to do. And this comes down to a level of comfort. So if you are going to be framing, you can frame yourself to the engineering plans. So you can decide whether that's something that you're comfortable with, or if you're going to bring in a builder to do that. And that's something that you will just have to get quotes with, and you can mull around yourself. We did all the framing downstairs ourselves, and then we brought builders in to do the upstairs because I have a real issue with heights. So framing a second story plus adding a roof was just not in my wheelhouse. So doing the ground floor, because we had the engineering plans, it all got signed off. So we were there's a level of comfort there that you're not guessing your way through it. Then you also have all of your finishing work can be done yourself. So depending on your level of motivation, you can add all the sheeting to the wall, you can strip the walls of paint, you can paint them, you can prep them, sand them. So my advice would be to get on YouTube and do as many tutorials as you possibly can. And then just remind yourself, like, even if you say, I'm going to do all this myself, if you get halfway through and you're like, do you know what, this is just beyond us, get somebody in at that point to finish the project. At any point you can just say, look, you know what, we can't do this. This is just more than we thought it was going to be, and it's too difficult. We're going to have to find money in the budget. It'll probably come from your fixtures and fittings at the end and your final design, and you can bring someone in then. So that's why it's important to have that detailed budget. So you can go through and say, okay, I need to find $2,000. Where am I going to find it? So let me go ahead and downgrade maybe, the Carrera marble to something else that's going to be more suited to your budget needs. You can also paint. I would say though, prep is the most important thing. I hate prep personally, but I love painting. Well, I enjoy the gratification of painting, like it's done like that. But you can absolutely paint, you can tile, and Bunnings there's so many opportunities to have tutorials online or little workshops that you can go to learn to tile, those sorts of things. So nothing is impossible. The main thing with DIY is that you do get this process when you're renovating of there's a high energy when you're demoing because you're seeing a big amount of change. And then there's this really irritating middle period where it is just like running your fingers down a chalkboard because everything feels slow, it's dirty, you just don't feel like you're getting ahead. But let me tell you, the minute you start putting sheets on the walls, the minute you start painting, the whole motivation comes back. That's how I found it anyway. And you feel like you're heading to the end of sort of the line. The main thing with DIY is that you have to remember is you're giving up time for money. So you're saving money by doing it yourself, but you are giving your time. So that is weekends, that's evenings, that's, whatever free time that you have. And if you have kids, you have to factor that in as well. That would be the big thing I would say, is that you have to just realize that it's an opportunity cost. You're giving something and gaining something. The other main benefit to doing it yourself is that you can make changes on the fly. So we have made so many changes to the design of our kitchen, just because as we lived in the space, we realized what we had originally planned for wasn't really going to work for the flow, and it wasn't as practical as we thought. And so DIYing it yourself means that you're not necessarily like locking all of your plans in from day one. You have some flexibility to change. So we added secondhand cabinets. We made them work for our footprint and how we wanted the flow of the kitchen to be. We were able to move things around as and when, and it didn't cost us a cent to do that. Whereas when you're working with a builder, every change that you make is going to cost you money. So that's something to think about as well. The other thing you can do is just be creative in upcycling. So we upcycled an old sideboard into a vanity, used stone off marketplace, and really it saved us thousands. And what I would say is whether or not you can DIY, I think it's a question you have to answer yourself. It is not impossible. It is something that you just have to figure out your comfort level, and also just be in the right mindset. And also remember that you don't have to forge through, like if it's causing you a lot of stress, you'll just have to find money elsewhere in your project. Nothing is impossible. It just comes down to your comfort level and your ability to sort of take on that additional stress. If you have any questions, add them below in the comments. Happy to answer them. Everything I've mentioned in this video, I've tagged below in the notes. Make sure to like and subscribe, and thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.